Vampire Stories, Vlad Tepes Second Part. The inspiration of Bram Stoker. Vlad Tepes the Impaler, the historical Dracula, Prince of Wallachia during the 15th century. The unusual cruelty that he displayed during his government gave rise to a diabolical legend that passed into literature at the hands of Bram Stoker. At the end of the 19th century, the Irish writer Bram Stoker conceived a horror novel related to the Central European legends about vampires and the undead that had already served as inspiration for other 19th century authors such as John Polidori, the doctor and traveling companion of Lord Byron. Investigating these types of stories, Stoker learned of the existence of a Romanian prince named Vlad Dracula, who had lived in the 15th century and had become famous, among other things, for his taste for the bloodthirsty. The fortune of Dracula's nickname is actually due to a confusion. His father, Prince or Voivode Vlad II of Wallachia, had entered the Order of the Dragon in 1428, at the hands of Emperor Sigismund of Luxembourg. Subscribe and like, so you help me create more content like this. For this reason he was henceforth known as Vlad Draco, while his son was called Vlad Dracula, that is, son of Draco. However, in Romanian mythology, the figure of the dragon did not exist, and the term Draco designated the devil, so Vlad II became the son of the devil in Romanian. This coincides with the legend about Vlad's cruelty and bloodthirsty spirit, already recorded in chronicles of his time. In them he was presented as a prince fond of torture and an enthusiast of slow death, who used to die by drinking the blood of his victims, or dipping bread in it. It is estimated that in his 3 terms in office, which amounted to just 7 years, he executed around 100,000 people, most of the time using the technique of impalement. For this reason he has been known since the 16th century as Vlad Tepes, that is, Vlad the Impaler. History of the Balkans. To understand this fame we must place ourselves in the context of the Balkans in the central decades of the 15th century. At that time, the Ottoman Empire was in the midst of expansion throughout southwestern Europe. Greece was subjugated in the 1360s, Serbia in 1389, and Bulgaria in 1396. Opposite the Ottomans were the Kingdom of Hungary and the principalities into which current Romania was then divided, Wallachia and Moldavia, along with Transylvania, an autonomous territory belonging to Hungary. Bran Castle once marked the border between Wallachia and Transylvania. However, despite regularly being associated with Vlad Iid or Cule, it seems that he never lived in this castle, and that his true fortress was Ponari Castle. The border wars became a constant war of extraordinary violence, in which mass executions and reprisals were the order of the day. Vlad of Wallachia was a product of this environment, and his life was a constant struggle for survival and for the power. A frontier prince. According to most authors, Prince Vlad II of Wallachia was born in Sighisoara, Transylvania, in 1431, and was one of the 3 legitimate sons of Vlad II of Wallachia. At just 13 years old he went to the Ottoman court, along with his brother Radu, as a hostage or guarantee of submission. Vlad II, in fact, had established an alliance with the Turks that earned him the enmity of the regent of Hungary, John Hunyadi, of Wallachian origin. In 1447 he prepared an offensive against Vlad, relying on the Vlach boyars, pro-Hungarian nobles. The result was the death of Vlad II and his son Mircea. Irritated by the loss of his ally in Wallachia, the Ottoman Sultan Murat declared his son Vlad Dracula claimant to the throne. The following year he launched his troops against Hunyadi, completely defeating him in Kosovo. Vlad took advantage of the circumstance to seize the throne of Wallachia, but his first period of government was short-lived, as in the same year 1448 he was expelled at the instigation of Hunyadi. Vlad initially took refuge at the court of the Ottoman Sultan, hoping that he would help him return to Wallachia. But, disappointed in his aspirations, in 1449 he went to Moldavia, where he had relatives. In the following years he intervened in the Moldovan internal struggles, until in 1451 he went to Transylvania. Installed in German cities in the country, such as Kronstadt, he tried to gather support with a view to recovering the throne of Wallachia. The opportunity came after the conquest of Constantinople by Mehmet II in 1453. Seeing Hungary increasingly threatened by the Ottomans, Hunyadi set out to find allies for a direct confrontation with the Turks. The nobleman who was then voivode of Wallachia was increasingly devoted to the Ottomans, and Hunyadi thought of replacing him by calling Vlad. He forgot all resentment for the death of his relatives, and threw himself into combat. This is how in 1456 he managed to take over the government of Wallachia again. He then began his longest phase of government, until 1462, the one that would earn him among his contemporaries and history the sinister reputation that has accompanied him since then. This fame is due first of all to the methods that Vlad used in the war. Since 1460, he decided to refuse to pay tribute to the Turks. Armed confrontation became inevitable, and this took on the overtones of a crusade, as brutal and bloodthirsty as those that had been fought in the Holy Land in previous centuries. The methods of a crusader. The campaign of 1462 gives us an example of his methods. In response to a Turkish offensive, Vlad crossed the Danube to plunder the Bulgarian country, then part of the Ottoman Empire. At the end of the campaign he sent two sacks full of ears, noses and heads to the Hungarian King Mátyás Corvino, accompanied by a letter in which he told him, "I have killed men and women, old and young, from Abu-Sitso and Novoselo to Sambit and Gigan. We have killed 23,880 for Turks and Bulgarians, not counting those whom we burned in their houses, or whose heads were not cut off by our soldiers. Let us finish together what we have started together, and let us take advantage of this situation, since, if Almighty God listens to the prayers and supplications of Christianity, if he favors the supplications of his pious servants, he will grant us victory over the infidels, enemies of the cross." Vlad, then, saw himself as a crusader. At the same time, the voivode applied the same violent tactics against his subjects in order to ensure his authority. He had every reason to fear for his position. The boyar nobility was disaffected, refraining from participating in the war against the Turks. The German settlers, for their part, staged various revolts. Hence, as the executive arm of justice, the voivode imposed it harshly punishing criminals and putting down rebellions. The sadistic executions of their victims were exemplary and contributed to imposing order. His severity gave rise to stories such as the one about the golden jug that he left in front of his residence in Turgovist, so that travelers could drink water from it. Such was the fear that the ruler inspired that no one ever dared to steal it. But the method of punishment with which the figure of Vlad is associated is, of course, that of impalement. It was not an invention of Vlad, but its history went back at least to ancient Assyria and would be used for a long time. The sources indicate, in any case, that Vlad went to extremes of macabre refinement, prolonging the agony of the condemned and using the bodies of the impaled as a terrifying warning. The best known example of his cruelty is what is known as Bos de los Empalados, a place where it is said that Tepes had all the trees cut down to impale more than 20,000 prisoners. How true are these tales of Vlad's cruelty? There is no doubt that some of them are biased, as is the case with the German chronicles, arising from the testimony of the German settlers in Transylvania harassed by the voivode. In 1462 Vlad was defeated by the Turks. He spent 12 years as a prisoner in Hungary, until in 1476 he regained his usefulness as a candidate for the throne of Wallachia. His third period as voivode ended when he was killed in a Turkish ambush. His head was displayed in Istanbul, and his body was buried in the Snagov Lake Monastery. See you.